This podcast is brought to you by seedheads.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to seedheads.com today to discover even more.
Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange. With me guest presenting, I'm Arthur Parkinson, and I'm with my good friend Sarah Raven. And what we thought we'd be talking about today is harvesting flowers from the garden that we're going to dry, because it's the perfect time of the year to do that, as summer is at full strength before we go into autumn, where a lot of the things that we want to be drying from the garden become a bit battered and moth-eaten. You really want to be doing it now, so we thought it'd be a really good reminder so you can all get your harvests in for the months ahead.
Absolutely. Hello, Arthur. Yeah, I always find people leave it too late, particularly the really dramatic seed heads and dried flowers. So alliums is the classic example that when I tend to be using them, and you too, you're a great Allium Christophii, a seed head fanatic, is Christmas. And so then people say, well, can I buy that? Well, no, not really, because none of us grow quite enough. And can I go and pick it? No, you can't, because we harvested it in July or early August. So that's why I thought it was a good one to slot in at this time of year. And I'm more and more crazy about the whole drying seed head and flower thing. And I think there are sort of two reasons. I mean, I'm sure you've got your reasons, Arthur, but maybe I'll start with mine. But the first is in May last spring, I was on the beautiful Greek island of Sifnos. And I went after the Chelsea Flower Show, which is always such an intense time, talking to lots and lots of people. And so it's quite nice to sort of just have a decompression chamber of going on a walking holiday, a botanizing holiday. But it had been a very dry spring last spring. And so, in fact, the botanizing really didn't transpire because everything was so dry. So all the hillsides are beautiful, and Sifnos is famous for its walks. And we did walk a lot, and it was absolutely wonderful. But the flowers were very much over. The lupins were already on their second flowering because they flower so early there in sort of February, and they'd self-seeded and were flowering again. So there were a few lupins out. But the thing that really bowled me over as you were walking across these totally straw-coloured hillsides with beautiful stony paths was these bright, vivid purple limoniums or stachys, and they still had their colour. So everything else was the colour of straw apart from these everlastings. And you could just see them like sort of Tibetan prayer flags off in the distance. And I would be thinking, what on earth is that initially? And then, of course, it turned out to be a limonium. And because they keep their colour. And, I mean, you've always been crazy on helichrysum straw flowers, haven't you, Arthur?
Yeah. Because they're just so lovely. I remember we did a Christmas shoot once above your fireplace, and a bit like the alliums, but they're more delicate and more like a little Christmas decoration. I just remember I just threaded them through the birch trellis that we did, and they just look so at home, like they're almost growing from the birch. And as you say, they keep their colour, and there's more and more varieties now that are just so vivid. I remember when I first started gardening, all you could get was that mixed packet of them.
Yes.
Whereas now you can get so many lovely. They've almost become like cosmos, haven't they? There is a colour for everybody now.
And they've become like that because they're so fashionable.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of second thing that I wanted to move on to. I mean, there are so many fantastic florists, like Bex Partridge has written a whole book about it. Kitten Grayson, Millie Proust, Graham Corbett, all these really wonderful florists who do a lot of their work on Instagram. They're using them from sort of October until March before the bulbs come, because they're the thing that is so sustainable. And just like we talked about, you love pressing flowers for that thing of winter tapping into the garden. I remember we talked about it on the June podcast, and you were saying it really brings back the joy of the garden when you get out all the all your pressed flowers and you're making cards and things, I think the dried flowers, they make complete sense to use. And you can make wonderful Christmas swags out of just some nice silk embroidery thread, then linking straw flowers together and putting that on your tree. And these aren't dowdy dried flowers. These aren't dried old dusty fireplace flowers. These are really
paired with wheat.
Glamorous. Yeah, exactly. They're not sort of corn sheaths. They're incredibly glamorous and vivid and vibrant and exciting. And I think it's just such a good turn up for the books. But I remember people saying to me, I don't know, 10 years ago, did I grow straw flowers or helichrysum? And I was like, oh no, they just have a bit of a maiden aunt image to me. But I've totally turned turtle on that. We have rows and rows of them now. Tend to do them, as you say, in the not so much the mixed colour, but the single colour rows. Because I find in the mixed colours, you get really quite a lot of that very, very acid yellow, which I'm not so keen on, and rather sort of wishy-washy white, sort of creamy white that's got a slight tinge of brown when it dries. Again, not so keen on that. I'm much keener on the rich ones. And just in terms of practicalities, what we find with straw flowers is you want to pick them when they're still, the flower is almost still shut. You don't see the golden centre. And that makes a real difference. We bring them in, and then we always hang them upside down. And that is really important. I find if you arrange with them the next go, they have very, very soft flower necks. And so you dry them upside down for literally only 2 to 3 weeks. And then you can store them somewhere. But they do need to be vertical the wrong way up for the stems to set rigid, in my experience. And so we're trying to pick them, I don't know, once a fortnight. We try and bring in a whole lot and hang them in one particular room, which is quite cool, but it has underfloor heating and they seem to dry really well in there. And they will then open. So they then do open.
So you don't need to give them so as you're picking them, Sarah, you're not picking them into a bucket of water, you're just into a basket or whatever, and then, as you say, upside down.
Yeah, it's weird.
So no conditioning at all, really, apart from upside down without water.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I didn't know that.
I find if I put them in water, that's when it just goes. Just the flower head is so big. Well, I mean, I don't know. But anyway, no, it seems to work much better for us. I mean, we may get a deluge of letters saying I'm doing something wrong. But anyway, in our experiments, that's what we do. And this time of year, we're starting to do zinnias in the same way.
Wow.
So I would put them in an inch or so of water for a day or two. And then again, I would take them out and hang them upside down. And I find they don't keep their colours for years, as the straw flowers, helichrysums will, or the limoniums, but they do certainly keep them right the way through the winter. And then, rather like you said with your pressed flowers, I would start again once you get a new crop. So I wouldn't, I would think of it like an annual flower arrangement to last a year rather than forever.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the thing. I mean, I'm quite ruthless actually now after Christmas time. I do chuck a lot because otherwise I just find it's fussed for the sake of fussed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then there's another whole family, as well as the helichrysums, called the xeranthemums. And I think they're closely related, but annual everlasting they're called. And they're more starry. The only ones I've ever grown are pink and white. But do you know, it's probably getting a bit late to grow these now, but maybe not from seed. Maybe a tad late, but it may still be worth it because they're very quick to come up to crop. And I find you can then have almost like this beautiful flowery meadow, which actually just dries where it is. And so we had some of those, both the strawflowers and the xeranthemums, in pots on my very, very hot south-facing, baking, rather Mediterranean terrace outside my kitchen. And I loved them because they just dried in the pot. And there they were all the way through the winter. So again, then when it got really wet, to be honest, they did go brown, but they were pretty good until Christmas at least. And then again, I bought them in and made them into swags. And you mustn't use wet oasis, as I'm sure you will know, because it's made from microplastic. But I do think that those little silver globes of drying oasis, if you're going to then keep the thing forever are sustainably not too dodgy. So I then push them in almost like a pomander and make them into tiny or bigger globe Christmas decorations. And I've still got one downstairs that Millie Pruce sent me 5 or 6 years ago, I think, that she'd made. And I put it on the Christmas tree every year. And I've now made quite a few smaller ones from both the heliochrysums and the xeranthemums. So, yeah, I'm really keen on those. And then in terms of seed heads and grasses, Arthur, do you have favourites?
I really like amaranthus increasingly because it just looks so crackers and wonderfully sea monster-ish. So yeah, the amaranthus, I think Red Army, the traditional one, that keeps its colour very well. And also the pink one's Hot Biscuit. Again, I think it's if you've got space to have a huge one, pick it big and just have one big one in a lovely glass vase with a bit of, and again, to weight your vases down, just use dry sand at the bottom. You can have a big arrangement then. And then if you open the window, it's not going to fall over. Yeah. So yeah, amaranthus. And then again, if I get sick of anything, it goes. And the nice thing about amaranthus, you can chuck it out in, 1st of January into the garden and it's a bird feeder, isn't it?
Yeah.
And same with, Panic and Frost Explosion. I love that scattered about at Christmas, but very quickly I get sick of it. Goes outside and, feed the birds with it.
Yeah. But honesty, you
honesty.
have a row with your partner every year about honesty.
Yeah, because it takes so long to pod. That is the only thing I don't like to chuck away. Because if you're going to do a massive vase, or say you're doing it for a winter wedding, you need to factor in 4 days. You really do. If you've got a wheelbarrow worth of, gorgeous honesty, I tell you, it will take you 4 days because you will get so bored. You will want to scream. It's worth it because it's so beautiful. And you do stand back and go, oh my God, our nature has given me the most gorgeous thing that you can then charge a lot of money for, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because you can't buy this stuff.
No.
They haven't found a machine to depot it.
Pod the two, because it's like the papery
two
bit.
Little crisps.
It's two little things either side, isn't it?
That each require peeling. So, you end up literally, if you can lie on your kitchen table and do it like that, I recommend you do it like that with your headphones in.
Yeah.
With a gin and tonic to just, get yourself through it. But yeah, and honesty, once you've done that, if you can then keep it somewhere dry and, maybe put a bin bag over the whole thing, you can get a few years out of it. But it doesn't travel that well. I've tried to get it into cars and things. It does start to look moth-eaten.
Yeah.
So ideally, it is the kind of thing that you do each year.
Yeah.
And, if you have it anywhere that's damp, it becomes mouldy and you can't depod it. So it does need to be somewhere, as Sarah said, with underfloor heating or somewhere with good ventilation. Don't put anything in the greenhouse or the garden shed and expect it to look good the week before Christmas. It's not going to be the reality. Yeah.
And the other thing that I've learnt to my cost is with the more sort of branchy, like the umbellifers or the alliums. So if I dry, for instance, Angelica, which is beautiful, or Smyrnium perfoliatum, which is beautiful as a seed head, or alliums more than anything, what I used to do is at the end of Christmas or the winter, I would put them into a box and shove them in the attic. And then what I found is when I came to take them out the following year, certainly if you've sprayed them, they are more robust. But as you took them out, they all fall apart because they've all meshed together and the sort of needles, in a sense, have sort of all integrated. And so what I do now is I do actually literally get one sheet of tissue and I wrap each of my allium heads in just one sheet of tissue. Or it could be brown paper, but that's less pliable. Or it could be greaseproof paper, but again, it's less soft and pliable. And if I do it like that, then I literally can just go into the attic. I mean, I'm lucky to have an attic, and just take them out and just off they go again. And I do find with the more complex heads, it's quite important to actually be quite fussy with that storing away. Otherwise, they just don't last.
Yeah.
And then good old Chas, as we call it. Are you going to talk about Chas?
Oh, yeah. Chasmanthium latifolium. I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, the most lovely bamboo grass and just so elegant. It's unlike anything else, really.
Yeah.
Because it keeps the shimmer. You don't have to spray it, I don't think, to keep the shimmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, ethereal. And I've noticed it's in a lot of London florists now. I think I saw a bucket of it at Liberty a few months ago.
Did you?
Yeah, it has become quite in vogue. I don't know who's growing it, but... Yeah.
Oh, that's spurred by us, Arthur. We were there first.
Yeah. And if in doubt, if anything looks just quite dry, I just add copper wire fairy lights, and often that does spruce everything up for Christmas.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to just mention a new one that Josie grew in the garden for us in 24, and I absolutely fell in love with it for this idea of having almost like a drying meadow, which once it gets really wet, it will go black, as we've said. So, if you want to keep the colour, but it is with the xeranthemum, but also with some zinnias, and then a new grass, well, new to us anyway, called Wagenheimia. And it literally looks like a Tom and Jerry cartoon fish skeleton. That they always in the alley, they would have the bin and you would have that perfect fish skeleton. And it's exactly what it looks like. And I think it's called the fishbone grass, but it's the most amazing thing. And it just reminds me of catching mackerel when I was a child. And you can get the whole sort of backbone out if you're taking the fillet off. And it just is so elegant and so beautiful. And I've got in my bathroom right now, from last autumn, I've got a little poppy seed head vase, which I love, on the window ledge. And I've got Wagenheimia, Panicum sparkling fountain, and the Chasmanthium. And they just look so lovely, backlit all the way through the winter. And then, as Arthur says, once spring comes and I can be putting bulbs in that vase, I'll chuck it. I won't sort of fuss about it. I think it's really good to think of these things as transient, to keep you going with some sort of beauty and garden derived things. But certainly with the alliums, I do keep them and I do store them and I do wrap them and put them away. And I think they're worth it. But with most of them, think of them as sort of transient. Think of them as a long-lasting bunch of flowers rather than something that's there forever, I would say. Oh, there was one other one I wanted to just mention, which was sanguisorba. So I don't know if any of you grow them, but the little one, which has deep crimson sort of caterpillars, I think is really good. And they keep their colour, actually, along with the amaranth. They keep their rich crimson colouring. And I know you, Arthur, got us to do a trial of drying dahlias. And
yes.
Just sort of one final thing on that is I think the darker the colour of both dahlias and tulips, the better, because they just go darker and richer. Whereas we dried, I don't know if you remember, Café au lait, which are famously huge.
Yeah.
And they were rather great, but they were quite, I don't know.
Grey.
They were a bit browny grey in
dead.
the end, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, before their time, really, weren't they?
Yeah. And the other thing that I really noticed is I've tried drying the drumstick dahlias, and they have not worked. And it's because I think really genuinely a dahlia, once it's dried, loses at least half, if not more, of its scale, weirdly. So there's an awful lot of sort of moisture in there. And I just find with the smaller ones, they just shrink away to kind of nothing. And so you need to go for the bigger varieties of the large dark ones. So something like Rip City would be a really good variety to try drying. And with those, just like the zinnias, 3 days in water and then hang them upside down. And that's your best way of doing them.
It's interesting you mentioned dark, because my favourite tulip to dry as confetti is Black Parrot. That keeps its shimmer. So I like having that on top of any... I don't like potpourri really, but we've got a bowl and I just add to that each year. Yeah. And it always looks lovely.
And always, again, doing fresh each year.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, well, lovely to talk, Arthur.
And you. Happy drying.
Happy drying,
Don't
yes.
dry out too much.
Happy hanging upside down. And storing for Christmas in a very sustainable way. Thanks so much for listening to Grow Cook Eat Arrange with Arthur Parkinson. And next week, actually, Arthur is going to do a solo about something he's really passionate about, which is violas and pansies. And that's because he is a great presser of flowers. And there's a wonderful new book out called Three Brothers Bloom, all about growing pansies and violas. And they are flower farmers who have really made this their specialism. So join Arthur interviewing them next week.
You can find more information, photos, and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.